I first thought of becoming a god as I was riding north from Madurai. The fever was gone. I felt more than just healthy. I was bursting with life and joy, floating as you do when you have put down a heavy load. Without exhaustion or discomfort to blunt my senses, without the distorting effect of fever, I saw myself to be in a paradise. First, there were the trees. Paradise would be unthinkable without trees. By their presence, they transform everything, framing the landscape, giving it depth, variety and freshness, making green glowing caverns under the sun and casting pools of dappled shade where people and animals can feel at peace. And the image was printed on my memory for life. Only on my memory? So intense was the image, is still, that I could not believe it was meant only for me. I felt it burning into some larger consciousness than my own. If my head could only be wired to a colored printout terminal, I could have trailed a blizzard of picture postcards from the four corners of the earth. Just to be carrying the consciousness of so much at the same time seemed to me to be miraculous, as though I were observing the earth from some far-off point, Mount Olympus perhaps, or a planet. I could imagine myself as a mythical being, a god in disguise that might pass their way only once in a lifetime. Why not a god on a motorcycle? There were monkeys too, silvery grey ones with long furry limbs. Halfway up the hill, I stopped to contemplate them, my head light with thought, recalling all the other times I had watched them in Africa, America, Malaysia, and most recently at the rest house in Mannar, where I had played with one for hours. They seemed so close to enlightenment, as though at any moment they might stumble over it and explode into consciousness. Their curiosity is extreme. They experiment with any unfamiliar object, a coin, a hat, a piece of paper, just as a human baby does, pulling it, rubbing it, sticking it in their ears, hitting it against other things. And nothing comes of it. To be so close, yet never to pierce the veil. I looked at myself in the same light, as a monkey given my life to play with, prodding it, trying to stretch it into different shapes, dropping it and picking it up again, suspecting always that it must have some use and meaning, tantalized and frustrated by it, but always unable to make sense of it. If I were a god, that is how I would view myself, I thought. At times I felt myself coming very close to that understanding, as though I might rise above myself and see at last what it was all about. A latent power of perception was stirring in me. For a long time I had been training myself to want nothing from others, to accept what was offered but to avoid expectation. I was far from perfect, but even the beginnings I had made were richly rewarding. I could feel that people appreciated my presence and even drew some strength from it, and in turn that feeling strengthened me. There were the beginnings of a growth of power, and I was determined to pursue it. The journey continued, as it always had, with this close interweaving of action and reflection. I ate, slept, cursed, smiled, rode, stopped for petrol, argued, bargained, wrote and took pictures. I learned about mushrooms, potatoes, cabbages, golden nematodes, Indian farmers and elephants. The thread connecting these random events was the journey. For me, it had a separate meaning and existence. It was the warp on which the experiences of each successive day were laid. For 3 years I had been weaving this single tapestry. I could still recall where I had been and slept, and what I had done on every single day of traveling since the journey began. There was an intensity and a luminosity about my life during those years, which sometimes shocked me. I wondered whether it might be beyond my capacity to hold so much experience in conscious awareness at one time, and I was seriously afraid that I would see the fabric of the tapestry beginning to rot before I had finished it. I thought I might be guilty of some offense against nature, for which I would be made to pay a terrible price. Was it improper for a mere human to attempt to comprehend the world in this way? For that was my intention. The circle I was describing around the Earth might be erratic, but the fact remained. It was a real circle. The ends would meet, and it would enclose the Earth. I would have laid my tracks around the surface of this globe, and at the end, it would belong to me, in a way that it could never belong to anyone else. I trembled a bit at the fates I might be tempting. The goal was comprehension, and the only way to comprehend the world was by making myself vulnerable to it, so that it could change me. The challenge was to lay myself open to everybody and everything that came my way. The prize was to change and grow big enough to feel one with the whole world. And during the long hours of solitary riding, my brain shuttled back and forth, delving into the past for new connections and meanings, synthesizing, analyzing, fantasizing, refining and revising my ideas and observations. The pattern on the tapestry still eluded me, though it shimmered somewhere on the edge of recognition. What must I do to see it clearly? Must I, like Icarus, strap on wax wings and fly to the sun? Whatever it was, I felt ready to try. The vital instrument of change is detachment, and traveling alone was an immense advantage. At a time of change, the two aspects of a person exist simultaneously. As with a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, there is the image of what you were and the image of what you are about to be. But those who know you well see you only as you were. They are unwilling to recognize change. By their actions, they try to draw you back into your familiar ways. It would be hopeless to try to become a god among friends and relations any more than a man can become a hero to his valet. It was chilling to realize that the sentimental qualities most valued between people, like loyalty, constancy, and affection, are the ones most likely to impede change. They are so obviously designed to compensate for mortality. The old gods never had any truck with them. Heat, cold, pain, pleasure, these spring from sensual contact, Arjuna. They begin and they end. They exist for the time being. You must learn to put up with them. The man whom these cannot distract, the man who is steady in pain and pleasure, is the man who achieves serenity. The untrue never is. The true never isn't. The knowers of truth know this. And the self that pervades all things is imperishable. Nothing corrupts this imperishable self. Lucky are soldiers who strive in a just war. For them it is an easy entrance into heaven. Equate pain and pleasure, profit and loss, victory and defeat, and fight. There is no blame this way. There is no waste of half-done work in this, no inconsistent results. An iota of this removes a world of fear. In this there is only single-minded consistency, while the efforts of confused people are many-branching and full of contradiction. Your duty is to work, not to reap the fruits of work. Wanting things breeds attachment. From attachment springs covetousness, and covetousness breeds anger. Anger leads to confusion, and confusion kills the power of memory. With the destruction of memory, choice is rendered impossible, and when moral choice fails, man is doomed. The mind is the ape of the wayward senses. They destroy discrimination as a storm scatters boats on a lake.